Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Arnold Palmer Invitational Initial Research Show. I hope your weekend went a whole lot better than mine. If you watched the DFS Tactics show last week, you would know what my strategy was and how much it completely backfired on me this week. So, with 3 weeks in a row of very poor performances, we're going to see if we can't end the losing streak and get on track for the Arnold Palmer this week. So with that in mind, all statistics tonight are provided by FantasyNational.com. Amazing resource. I say it every show. It's going to make you a much better DFS player, a much smarter gambler. And if you have the tool, you don't have to listen to a dumbass like me and lose the money. It's well worth the investment. Go check it out. Chat is open. It's live. I want to hear about if you use Seb Straka and Kurt Kitayama, any outright wagers you had this week, if they were successful or not. Mine were completely not, and DFS was a complete shit show, so fantastic week for me. But I want to hear about your all successes. Let me know how that went. So again, we are live, chat's open. If you want to see some particular stats for this upcoming week with the Arnold Palmer, jump in there. So, and as always, if you just want to make fun of me for my losing picks, it's always warranted. Finally, in the description of the video, there are links to my social media where I post my betting cards, and I have some humor during the week, especially when the picks that I make go completely haywire and fall off a cliff. Or in the case last week, go in the water a lot. Any interesting tidbits of research that I find throughout the week as well, I'll post on there. So make sure you give me a follow there. With all that in mind, let's forget about last week and move on to the Arnold Palmer as we do our initial research for the 2022 Arnold Palmer Invitational. And we come over here that we always start with on a Sunday evening, and that is the tournament fact sheet for the upcoming tournament. And we are in Orlando, Florida, at Bay Hill Club and Lodge, the usual spot, or as far as I know, they always have played the Arnold Palmer here at Bay Hill. Let me make sure I have chat up. That way you all can jump in there and make fun of me. It is a very, very long par 72, about almost 7,500 yards. Very, very, very fast greens. A lot of times it's lightning more than fast. These are some of the fastest greens on tour, if not the fastest. Definitely comparable to Augusta. It's just extremely, extremely fast greens. We are on Bermuda again, all the way around the course. The only note that for this year is that the fairways weren't overseeded, which I tried to talk to the caretaker at our local golf course, and I don't know much about it, so I'm going to have to get him on and hopefully explain what all that means. I picked up overseed and Bermuda. So as far as I know, it doesn't make a big difference, but he would know more than I would. But anyway, the entire course is Bermuda. We have greens, rough fairways, all that. So the biggest takeaways here are extremely long, fast lightning greens. They are above average in size by quite a bit. They're about the same size as the greens that we saw this week at PGA National. They run about 7,500 square feet on average here at API. There are 9 holes with water in play, so not as common as the Honda, but certainly enough to bring in some high scores. So that is the big takeaway from the Arnold Palmer. Long, big greens, but fast greens, a little bit of water, and Bermuda. So with that in mind, let's move over to Fantasy National. And you will see here that I've got a custom date range here. I have set this at the Fortinet from this PGA Tour season. So guys like Terrell Hatton, and now I think is Shane Lowry playing? I can't remember now. But Rory, who only has 8 rounds here. There's Tommy Fleetwood, who just came over from Dubai and Abu Dhabi and such. He's only got 8 rounds, and again, it'll be 10. The Honda is not in yet for Fantasy National, so this will be 10 for Tommy Fleetwood. Terrell Hatton will have. There's Davis Thompson, a rookie. See Bryson, who hasn't played much. That's why he's so low in the rankings, or at least strokes gained total. Hendrik Stenson will have 6 rounds. So the Euros will have some information, but again, not too much. And that was my downfall for the Genesis. And while I included it last week at the Honda, it was still pretty underrated, especially Shane Lowry, who really popped on the difficult metrics, but not a lot of other places, at least in terms of on the PGA Tour, and of course played difficult, and he was in great form coming in. So the model definitely underrated Shane Lowry, and therefore I didn't use him, and that was to my detriment. But I'm going to use the rankings here, the strokes gained total, as a loose bit here, because it's definitely going to change after the Honda stats are loaded in here. But since the beginning of the PGA Tour season, the top 10 in strokes gained total, with no filters, just simply strokes gained total, wide view. You've got Sungjae is number 1, Russell Henley, Mark Leishman, John Rahm, and Scotty Scheffler are your top 5, followed by Taylor Gooch, Seamus Power, Hideki, Maverick McNeely, and Tom Hoge. And you'll notice that I haven't done, I usually cap it at the last 36. I kept it at the last 50. I just kind of want to see who's been playing a lot, and if they've played a lot, how well they've played. So I'm just trying to get even a bigger view of some of these performances. And I need to change something, because I'm 0 for 3 in the past 3 weeks with one pretty poor performance, one pretty bad performance, and one embarrassing, just humiliating performance this past weekend. But there's a look at your strokes gained total. But before we get too much further into it, I always like to go into the course breakdown. So this is Bay Hill Club and Lodge. Again, long par 72. So you got the 4 par 4s, 4 par 3s, and so on. There is chances to score on this course. You've got a 5% eagle rate on the 16th. It's a very short par 5. You've got a decent enough eagle rate chance on the 6th hole, which can play fairly short from time to time. But you also have some monster of some difficulty here. The par 3 17th plays to 2/10 over par. The 18th, it's not even that long of a par 4, but it plays to 3/10 over par. The first and second hole, 5th toughest and 3rd toughest, up near 2/10 difficult or over par. So plenty of places to perhaps get some birdies, get on a little bit of a run here, and even some eagles really. But plenty of places where the course is going to come up and get you as well. And we'll see in the historic conditions that this tournament lately has played difficult, but it's not always been the case, so I'm not sure what angle, if any, I'm going to lean into as far as easy versus difficult metrics. We'll get into that a lot in the Data Dive show, but we'll take a kind of an overview look here in a bit. Strokes gained by shot type, you can see here, approach heavily favored over putting, and then off the tee around the green is kind of a normal type layout there, at least graphically. And that's for the top 10s. Excuse me. If you go top 5s, the putting kind of catches up a little bit, but you can see how much the approach really starts weighting as compared to especially the other two off the tee and around the green. And then the winners putting really catches up, but the approach really rises as well. Both of these are near 1.5, and the off the tee and the around the green shrink in comparison to the other two. Again, you'll see the top fives. Just pay attention here to the y-axis, where I think it stays the same actually. So one here, just a little bit above one. The off the tee is right at a half. Around the green is 0.35, and then just look how much it shoots up. Same y-axis here. The off the tee does climb above the the half, the 0.5. Yeah, around the green actually shrinks a little bit. So all approach, quite a bit of putting as well, which you would expect from winners and top fives. Guys are generally going to be climbing the leaderboards if they're putting well that week. But a lot of similarity from the Honda in the sense that it is a ball striker's course. It is iron play. Off the tee is pretty important. So you can see that here, ball striking versus short game. If we go by strokes gained, by a hole by par fives, we're back to what I would consider a normal type distribution here. The par fives are the most important part. Then the par fours and the par threes. And as you climb up the leaderboard again, the par threes really start taking a bit more credence to the point where it climbs above the par fours. But par fives have consistently been the most important here at Bay Hill. So there's a look at the strokes gained by hole by par. Going to look at some par fives. We're definitely going to look at par fours. Par threes, probably a little bit, and we'll see if we can narrow in on a length in particular of maybe the par threes or maybe the par fives, or and for that matter, the par fours. But we see that the par fives are the most important here at Bay Hill. Hole composition, the par threes are fairly evenly spread. You've got a middle length one, a couple long, and an extremely long one. In the par fives, you've got 3 of the 4 that fall in between 550 and 600. But again, the 6th hole here plays to 555, so that'll probably play 0 to 500, or 500 to 550 some. But that's on the shorter end. Then you got the 574 and 590 are the other two. So it is 3 out of 4 here from 550 to 600, but I'd almost call it, like 2.5, considering the 555 length of the 6th hole. So we'll see if maybe 550 to 600 is a dominant performer or dominant metric as far as leaderboard success at Bay Hill. Now in the par fours, you do have a couple of what I'll call semi-drivable, depending on pin placements and tee boxes. Some guys might try to drive these greens, but they're fairly short par fours. Risk reward where you can take on water if you think you can give yourself a great eagle chance or whatnot. You've got 3 fairly shorter par fours and then 5 good length par fives, 5 good length par fours. And again, we'll see if there's a length that plays the most important, especially this 450 to 500, because it is the most par 4 number holes of this length at Bay Hill. Approach shot distribution, and I mentioned last week that I was wanting to get your all's input on how or what do you think any weight, if any, should be put into the length of approach shots, considering some of the metrics just don't go to leaderboard success. And it'll be curious to see, or I'll be curious to see how the Honda played out, because the Honda, a lot of it was, I believe, 150 to 175, and I didn't put any of that in the final data model. And if that really played credence to this year's tournament, then that means we need to really focus on the 200 plus, kind of like we did at the Farmers. So I'm gonna do some heavy digging into this 200 plus approach shot. Probably going to put it at least at 5%, just because sometimes I don't know how to weight these, and if the majority of the shots are coming here or from this distance, then it would make sense you want to see who's playing or hitting those types of approaches the best. So definitely going to be looking into this heavily, scrutinizing it and whatnot. Historic cut line here at Bay Hill is roughly between 2 and 3. So sometimes you see it can get up to +5. It's been as low as -1, but generally it's hovering in this +2 to +3 range, which tells you that it is on the difficult end of average. I think it's technically classified as average, but right on the border of average and difficult. Not an easy course by any means. There are a few bit more birdies than bogeys. You see about 17.7% to 16.5%, but there's a fair amount of doubles, whereas the eagles are pretty much non-existent except for that one hole. So again, when you weight the doubles plus the bogeys over the birdies, it's probably a bit more difficult, but there are chances to score well here. Driving accuracy is really high. There are some tee shots that require precision. There are some holes that you can bomb, but most of the time guys will be trying to find the fairway as much as they can, knowing that the rough is pretty penal here. Green and regulation percentage, just speaking to the difficulty of the course and the length of the course, green and regulation percentage is quite low here. You would expect that to be for a difficult course as well. So might be an emphasis on greens in regulation this week. Proximity perhaps, but greens in regulation here are much lower. You see the single round scores. If par is 72, you see the majority of them come between 70, 71, and 72, mostly at 71. So a decent bit of -1 to maybe -2. 3 putts per round, slightly higher here than the average tour event. That's speaking to the just lightning fast greens. If players aren't careful or diligent with their putting, the putts can get away from them quite easily. So guys really have to be on their game on these greens. Driving distance, if you see driving accuracy a little bit higher than the average tour event, or sometimes even a lot higher, you would expect distance to be lower. That's the case here. Like I said, some holes require precision and knowing where to take some chances and when not to. So distance quite a bit lower here. Green and regulation proximity is a bit higher here. That would speak to, one, the difficulty, two, the length of the approach shots. Generally, if players have wedges in their hands, they're going to be a lot closer than if they are approaching with 5 irons and 4 irons and whatnot. And it's also speaking to the size of the greens. Again, these are 7,500 square feet on average, and the average tour event is about 6,000. So bigger greens, longer approaches, generally a difficult course that combines to proximity being longer than the average tour event. That is a look at Bay Hill graphically in a scorecard kind of view. Let's look, as I mentioned, at the historic conditions. The past 2 years has played extremely difficult. 7 of the 8 rounds have been difficult. They have been firm. They did soften up a bit last year, but the rough has always been long. That's why guys really focus on hitting the fairways, because they know how penal the rough is. Green speeds for the past 3 years have been lightning. Again, just speaking to the importance of putting and 3-putt avoidance. So that's probably something that we'll need to take a look at this week, is 3-putt avoidance, especially on these lightning fast greens. But as we go back in time, even if the greens were long, greens were lightning, the rough is long. 2019, every single round played easy. 2018, it was average, and then it's been easy for years beyond. So really, the difficulty has been ramped up in the past 2 years, which I'm not sure what to attribute that to, because Dick Wilson was the original architect of Bay Hill. And Arnold Palmer came in and renovated it in 2009. So if it was 2019, I would understand, but it was 2009. So something has changed here at Bay Hill, either organically, or if the PGA Tour kind of set it up or forcefully made it more difficult. I don't know, but again, this is why I'm kind of torn on if I should use difficult. I definitely don't want to use easy because this course isn't easy. Whether I should use difficulty or not, but definitely I'm going to use the over 7,400. 2020 and 2019 did play to under 7,400, but most of the time you can see it is over 7,400 yards. So we're definitely going to be looking at long course metrics. Strokes gained total on long courses, probably approaches on long courses, speaking to the 200 plus approach shots and whatnot. But there's a look at the Arnold Palmer historic conditions. Let's move over to the tournament history tab on Fantasy National, which is where kind of shows which guys have played well and which haven't here historically in the past. And your defending champion Bryson has played this event very, very well, although he is not number one in the past 5 years. That belongs to Rory. Rory has had all 5 of his finishes in the top 10 in the past 5 years. That's not what I wanted to do. All 5 in the past 5 years have been in the top 10, with a win back in 2018. Bryson, second most in strokes gained total. He is your defending champion. He solo second 2018, solo fourth in 2020, with a bit of a middling finish in 2019, but he has played this course extremely well. Probably the most famous part of last year's tournament is when he took on that 6th hole and drove it over the water near the green. I believe it measured close to 400 something yards. And that hole is not designed to do that. So that's why he took advantage of the par 5s quite a bit last year. You've got Mark Leishman, who won in 2017. He is 4 for 5. He did miss the cut last year, but has had some very good success here at the Arnold Palmer. Fitzpatrick has played well. Terrell Hatton, who won in 2020. 4 solid performances and a clunker way back in 2018. You got Sung Jae 3 for 3. Tommy Fleetwood 4 for 5. Luke List 4 for 4. You got quite a bit of guys who have had a good amount of success here. Jason Kokrak 4 for 5. Very good finishes. He does have a miscut. There's Matt Wallace. Keith Mitchell's played well. Now let's look at the other end. Guys, for whatever reason, just haven't played this event well. Siwoo is, I'll say 3 for 4. He withdrew last year. So 3 for 4 with a middling cut made. Cameron Champ 0 for 3. Schwartzel 1 for 4. Norlander just 1 for 2. He did make the cut last year, pretty bad. CT Pans 2 for 5, but 2 pretty poor cuts made. Let's see other guys that might be notable. Kevin Truman is 3 for 4 in making the cut, but nothing above a top 40 finish. Let's see. Other guys maybe. Cam Davis didn't play well last year. Monati didn't play well last year. Paul Hostler, interesting. 3 for 3 in making the cut, but has been under field average and strokes gained total. So there's a look at the opposite end of the spectrum of guys who just don't play this event well. We'll leave it on that. We'll just take a quick look at the leaderboard from last year. And as you saw, it played difficult 3 of the 4 rounds. The rough is always long, always lightning speeds. The winner, Bryson, was at 11 under. So very similar to the Honda in the sense that it was difficult last year. And that was, speaking to this final score, the Honda winner today, Straka shot -10. Difficult. It's just difficult. You can see even par gets you in the top 30. So did not play easy last year. Let's take a look at some statistics from last year. No surprise, Bryson dominated using his biggest weapon, which is off the tee. His approach game was really good as well. He was on fire with the putter, so that equates to a successful tournament. You see here, it looks like, bearing out what the graph said, the approaches were pretty darn important. Putting, minus Jason Kokrak, putting was pretty darn important. The around the green game last year was actually fairly solid. When we look back at previous years tomorrow in the Data Dive show, you'll see this is a bit of an outlier. Around the green doesn't usually play that much of an effect. We saw that in the graphical view. But if we sort by these particular stats, your winner, Bryson, was number one. But you had a couple of miscuts here. Shane Lowry was very good off the tee. Didn't do anything else. He didn't make a putt all week, which was 2 days for him. He drove it well, did nothing else, missed the cut. Jim Herman, kind of the same thing. He was just more all around bad, whereas Shane Lowry just didn't make a putt. But you do have some very high finishes here. Kokrak, top 10. Fitzpatrick, top 10. Lee Westwood, the runner-up. His irons were in fuego last year, and then turned around and played in great at the players. Terrell Haddon, Homa's. So you got a decent amount of high finishers. You do have 2 miscuts here. Irons game, Tyler Duncan was very good, but missed a lot of putts. He still made the cut, but to a middling to clunker finish. But you got your third, second, fourth, 4 straight top 10s. The winner, top 20. So this is where a lot of the leaderboard success comes from. Probably no surprise, a difficult course is going to bring out the best iron players in the world. Again, this was a bit of an outlier, but you can see how important around the green was last year. Now, you do have 2 middling finishers at the top of the around the green leaderboard, Ben, Kevin Na. But then, very, very correlating success here. Top 10, runner-up, top 10, top 25, top 5, 10, 10. So very, very important factor last year. And then putting, probably as strong as the approach. Maybe not as strong, but a lot of high finishes here. You don't have any miscuts until you come down to Leishman in the putting leaderboard here. So a good run of cut makers. You had a clunker here from Victor Perez, but some high finishers as well. There's a look at the strokes gained. Don't want to spend too much time on it. We have a little bit of Excel to look at as well. But speaking to the fairways and the greens, you can see here greens in regulation 9 and 10. That's your number 1 and number 2. You can see here just how much it played a factor. Again, second, first, Will Zalatoris, 9.3 greens in regulation, top 10 from Kokrak, top 20 from Steele. There's Corey Connors, who was third. You do have a middling and a very clunker finish here, and then a miscut. So the extreme top of the leaderboard was all about greens. But then there wasn't too much strong correlation after it, especially when you get past Lowry here. It starts to tail off as far as green and regulation leaderboard and correlation. Let's take a look at good drives. A bit more, not as solid, I would say, up at the top, but a little bit more consistent. Your top 20, top 25, second, 30th, 20th winner. So good drives, also there. Fairways, not nearly as important. And it's kind of surprising to see that from the graphical view. We saw that the fairways were hit more often at this course than the average tour event. But last year, it wasn't a big factor. It just wasn't. Middling finish from Kisner, Sung Jae top 25, middling from Gim, and then, So, distance, not really either. Bryson's always going to be at the top or near the top of driving distance. But Rory, top 10, Luke List, middling, Fleetwood. It's surprising to see Fleetwood be so high on the driving distance, but he's there, tied for 10th. Max Homa tied for 10th. So, But again, no strong correlation from the driving distance either. So if anything, it's good drives, maybe greens, maybe. We'll have to check tomorrow's data dive show to see if one of these two play out a lot more. Something else I want to definitely make sure I look into is this proximity, and let's see how important the 200 plus was last year. A decent amount. You definitely had Bezaden who not play well from this distance, and generally speaking, he is not a long iron hitter or a good player off the tee. It's gotten better, but he is much more known for wedges and around the green and putting. But other than that, Jason Kokrak was very minimally below field average. Fleetwood a little bit more so. Wierenski. So if we sort by the 200 plus, you've got a decent little correlation here, especially in terms of proximity. These numbers are generally not, don't seem very strong correlation, say like driving and approach. But to come down to Brian Stewart, which is about 12th to 14th before you find a miscut, and some of these are really high finishes. Laird's middling, Duncan probably a bit of a clunker and a middling. I mean, you've got a top 10, two top 25s, your winner, another top 20, another top 10. So pretty strong here on the 200 plus. Yo, Darnell, if you didn't catch the intro, I hope your DFS weekend and your outright wagers went a whole lot better than mine. In fact, I'm surprised you tuned in after the humiliating performance that I put in this past weekend. It was atrocious. I thought the Phoenix was bad. Phoenix was great compared to this. But how did you do? Did you use Sepp Straka, Kitayama, all these other guys, Shane Lowry? I didn't use Lowry, and I had a narrative on why I wasn't using him. I was just wrong. It's just wrong. But I definitely wanted to look at proximity. Let's look at par fives just because graphically it said it was the most important here. Par fives, yeah, okay, -0.8. Yeah, you lost. Yeah, see, I had a narrative on why I wasn't going to use Lowry and why I wasn't going to use Horschel. A lot of it was the projected ownership. But Lowry, I didn't have a real feel for where his game was. I had seen the results overseas, but since he hadn't played stateside, the beginning of the calendar year, he was just rated pretty darn low in my model and underrated. Worst week in a while, yeah, same here. But looking at the par fives, it looks like you got some pretty strong correlation here, and when you sort it, you got John Huh, clunker of a finish, but I mean, there's a lot of high-end finishers here on the par fives. And speaking to the ranges, we saw that 3 of the 4, at least on the scorecard, played to 550 to 600. And there's a bit of strong correlation here. First, 10th, second, some middlings. I'm curious to see the 500 to 550. Definitely not as strong as the 550 to 600. So it looks like if there's a range, at least last year, it was the 550 to 600s. So there's a look at the leaderboard. I'm going to come back to this in case we want to come back to it. But let's start going through Fantasy National here and find what guys we might be triggering onto early on in the week here. So the first thing we always do once we after we look at the course breakdown, we come into the putting. We know that we're on Bermuda, and I'm half tempted to see only Lightning because it's played Lightning the past 3 or 4 years. But I am going to put fast just in case they slow it down a little bit. But definitely Lightning. If you just want to use Lightning, I would not argue against using that. especially since. Well, you know what? Let's just take a look here. Lightning the past 2 years, Lightning in 17. You had fast and average, so it's in between fast and lightning, and it's played lightning for the past 4 or 5 years. You know what? I think it can't get any worse. Well, it can always get worse, but let's just look at lightning. I'm going to remove this custom date range. I'm going to go to the last 12 months just to see how many rounds that is on lightning Bermuda greens. You've got 20 rounds, so I think that should be pretty good. And this dates back to last year's Arnold Palmer, so I think that'd be okay. So your top 10 putters on lightning speed, not fast, only lightning speed Bermuda greens. Your top 10. You got Christian Bezadenhout and Justin Rose are tied for first. Now note that Rose only has one tournament. It was the PGA last year, so it's not as valued to me as Bezadenhout, who's got 3 times the sample size. But just going off the ranks here, Bezadenhout and Rose are tied for first. Then you got McCarthy, Nick Watney, Zach Johnson in your top 5, followed by Brendan Todd, Sung Jae, Matthew Fitzpatrick, Adam Long, and Cameron Young are your top 10. And again, like Justin Rose, Nick Watney only has 4 rounds. Cameron Young only has 4 rounds. His is from the Sanderson Farms, where he did finish second. So he is at least comfortable on lightning fast greens. Nick Watney's was at the Sanderson Farms as well. He put extremely well that tournament. I wonder what place he came in on that. Oh, that tells you he tied with Cameron Young, tied for second. So both of those guys extremely comfortable with lightning fast greens. It's good stuff there. So there's your top 10. If I do add the fast filter and make it fast and lightning over the past calendar year, let's see how much it changes. We've got Zach Johnson, Denny McCarthy, Matthew Fitzpatrick, Bezadenhout, Todd are the top 5. So all 5 of these guys were in the top 10 with just lightning, although the order did change. Patrick Reed and Ian Poulter, Brandon Grace, Kevin Kisner, and Bryson now all jump into the top 10, bottom half of the top 10. None of these guys were in the top 10 from just lightning. So I'm probably going to put more weight into just the lightning. And in the data model, I might just use lightning speed Bermuda greens. I mean, these are notoriously some of the fastest greens on the tour. Something else that I definitely will take a look at this week is performance on long courses. In 2020, it definitely played, under 7,400 yards, but that was not the norm. So your top performers, let's see, how many rounds is this on long courses? 21. So go back. So there's the Puerto Rico, which that reminds me, I'll have I meant to do it in the intro. I'll have it on the sign off, an announcement for this week if you didn't catch last week's. That's back to the Puerto Rico. Matsuyama back to the Arnold Palmer. Okay, so that's fine. So in the last 12 months, the last calendar year, your top performers on long courses over 7,400 yards: Will Zalatoris, John Rahm, Corey Connors, Luke List, Rory, Justin Rose, Hideki, Chris Kirk, Andrew Putnam, and Gary Woodland. Those are your top 10 on strokes gained total on long courses. Probably no surprise, you've got the guys that play the majors and play them well. Luke List, who won the Farmers, which is a long course. Let's see, Chris Kirk, where's his performance coming from? Probably the Valero would be my guess. Yeah, that would be my guess. Although he did play last year's Arnold Palmer pretty well, to be fair. Andrew Putnam, he is... Sorry, that's not what I meant to hit. I wanted this one. Andrew Putnam, Puerto Rico, Arnold Palmer, played very well. Wells Fargo, looked like he played okay. So he's got some success on long courses. Let's see. Anything else that we might want to add from long courses? Maybe strokes gain approach on long courses. No, let's take that off. I'm going to just look at strokes gain approach, and I'm definitely going to narrow this in for the last 6 months. I don't want to go through the whole custom filter, so let's just go through the last 36 rounds in the last 6 months. So this is basically since the Fortinet, minus a couple of exceptions like Tommy Fleetwood and Shane Lowry and such, but your top strokes gain approach players in the last 6 months: Tom Hoge, Victor Hovland, Will Zalatoris, Russell Henley, Hudson Swafford, Taylor Gooch, John Rahm, Keegan, Scotty Scheffler, and Luke List. So again, more of your premier players, guys who are hot, have won lately. Henley's always known as a ball striker. Hoagie's always been known as a ball striker or iron player. So good stuff there. The last couple of things I want to look at in Fantasy National are proximity. Definitely want to look at the 200 plus. So your top performers in the last 6 months over on approaches over 200 yards. You got Sung Jae, Matthew Wolff, John Rahm, Bryson, Maverick McNeely are your top 5, followed by Sebastian Munoz, Hideki, Will Zalatoris, Cameron Champ, and Cameron Young. So your top 10 on approaches 200 plus. And again, I've always been a little bit uncomfortable with the approach shot distribution chart and how much to put weight into it, because sometimes the data says that it's not a big factor, even if the majority of the approach shots come from there. So I'm really curious to see what the Honda shows, because I believe the Honda was 150 to 175, maybe 125 to 150. And if that played a big factor, then that means that the analysis that I was going on was wrong, because I didn't put any weight into it. We definitely want to look at 200 plus. Last thing we can look at, actually, you know what? I want to look at three-putt avoidance. I want to look at three-putt avoidance on Lightning Bermuda greens. This is going to be pretty important this week, I think. I don't want the last 2 years, moron. Last 12 months. On Bermuda, Lightning Bermuda speeds. Three-putt avoiders: Braden Grace, Chris Kirk, Jason Day, Chez Reavie, Sung Jae, K.H. Lee, Bryson, Adam Long, Billy Horschel, and Denny McCarthy. Again, I said it all last week. Anytime Billy Horschel's on Bermuda, or anytime you're on Bermuda and Billy Horschel's in the field, you got to take notice. He just loves putting on Bermuda. Adam Long, interesting to see. K.H. Lee. Bryson doesn't get enough credit for how good of a putter he is, even though he's known for hitting the devil out of the ball. He's a good putter. Let's see. I saw Ian Poulter. He's inside the top 15. Tringali. So definitely wanted to look at that. We'll take a big look at more of these metrics tomorrow in the Data Dive show. But for now, let's move on over to Microsoft Excel, and let me bring up the comparison course spreadsheet here. And again, the lower the number means the more correlating success. So 33.5 is more important than 42.3 and whatnot. But all of these numbers are pretty darn low, which tells you that it is a true test of your all-around game. And graphically, we saw this from Fantasy National. Approach was more important than the putting, than off the tee, than around the green. And again, where this differs from Fantasy National is this is taking the top 30 finishers, so anyone who ties for 30th or better, and this was their correlating success. So approach, clearly important. We saw greens somewhat, but good drives is close to that. So the more I'm thinking about it, the more I think that good drives might be the statistic to go with this week, especially since the rough is so penal. Guys are probably just going to try to find the fairway anyway, and those that don't, if they can still hit the green, is very important. And guys who can maybe perhaps get a little bit more distance when they're clubbing down. We saw last year that distance wasn't really all that much of a factor, and it was the most important it had been in the last 5 years. So the way I'm seeing it, I think good drives gained is probably going to be the metric that I'll focus on this tab, at least the most. Might look at some greens. And then we come over here to eagles and birdies. We didn't look at birdies versus bogeys. They're roughly the same, a little bit more emphasis on the bogeys, but you'll notice here, and we'll do the outlier kind of math tomorrow in the data dive, but look how much of an outlier this is. Hopefully you can just see that. This is 36, the next highest is a 30. That's a pretty extreme outlier, so that one gets removed tomorrow in the data dive. Par 3s, 35, whereas last week we saw at the Honda how we put so much emphasis on the par 3s. It was a 37, so even the par 3s are more important here at the Arnold Palmer, or here at Bay Hill, because I'm going to butcher Arnold Palmer every time that I try to say it, and my accent's going to come out. Strokes gained par 4, still important, 23, but you see the par 5s, 31 here at the at Bay Hill. It was only a 48 last week at the Honda at PJ National, so a complete turnaround on emphasis. Par 5s are so very important, and you see here the 550 to 600 looks to be the range. You would say 0 to 500, but none of the holes on the scorecard measure to this. So this is really one hole when the tees get moved around. And I don't like to focus on just one hole, so probably going to go into this range the most. But definitely par 5s. Looking at par 4s, it looks like it's the 400 to 450. 3 of the par 4s on the scorecard measure to here, 5 measure to here, and 2 measure to here. So it's interesting to see. We'll have to see if the 400 to 450 really is the range that we want to focus on, because there's 2 pretty extreme outliers here in the 450 to 500. If you take those 2 out, normally I don't take 2 outliers out, but if you do take these 2 out, it becomes a very important stat and very consistent. So I don't know. Definitely, this is very consistent. I know that, and a very important one at that. So definitely par 4s, definitely 400, 450. Last couple of things I'm going to look at here. Proximity, 48 total at the Arnold Palmer. It was 54 at the Honda. We see 200 here. It's under 50. It's very rare that you find a proximity be under 50 in terms of importance. So it does look like the 200 plus is going to be pretty important. Now, having said that, this is a low outlier, so if you remove that, then that number jumps up. So that's why I always want your all's opinion, either in the comments or live in chat. You know, how do you approach proximity if you see a course that has majority of their approach shots come from 200 plus? Do you put a lot of stock into it? Do you put no stock into it? Do you see how much it plays year over year? So I always want to hear from you all, because that's the one part of data models that I'm not the most confident in. But there's a look at the Arnold Palmer, at least from a intense data view. I would normally show you the course evaluation, but honestly, almost every single metric is above average in terms of importance, is positive. So we're just going to be looking strictly at the course data detail and figuring out which of these we're going to want to focus on. It is just an elite test of golf. The last thing I'm going to bring up here in Microsoft Excel, as I pull it over from the other monitor, this is a kind of a take on the tournament history tab in Fantasy National. This is the players in the field, at least as of, when did I make this? Yesterday, I think. So of the guys that are in the field as of yesterday, and you know, so that's if someone withdraws and then adds, I won't have them on this. This is their performance, not shown as a strokes gained total, but broken out. in its entirety. And we saw how Rory was the most strokes gained total. He's he's played every year here the past 5 years. He averages a top 5. He's had no finish worse than the top 10. You can see he does it all in the approach, or not all, but he is probably the best in strokes gained approach of the players in the field. He putts well here. He's good off the tee here. Distance, everything. Sung Jae, 3 events, top 10. Bryson was actually number 2 in strokes gained total, but he is tied for 4th in the average finish. He's doing it in the way Bryson does it, off the tee. Pretty good with the irons, pretty good at putting. So let's just kind of take a quick look here at a couple of things before we sign off for the night. Let's sort. Let's just sort by strokes gained approach, largest to smallest, and get a feel for who ball strikes it well here. So again, Rory number 1, Tom Hoge is number 2, Adam Schenk, although it's just one event. Will Zalatoris the same, just one event. Hit his irons well that year. Lee Westwood, solo second last year. Corey Connors is only 1 for 3 in making the cut, but he does Corey Connors things. Hits his irons extremely well. Luke List, 4 for 4. His irons are good here. Bryson, 4 for 4. Interesting to see Henrik Stenson, 2 for 5. Terrell Hatton, 5 for 5, average of a top 25 finish. So Ricky has always had success here, 5 for 5, near a top 30 average. So there's a look at your strokes gained approach. Let's look at a couple of things in particular. Let's look at good drives. Who leads in good drives gained? You'll see. Yep. All right. So the good drives gained. You've got Russell Henley, who's only played it once, to a middling finish. You've got Doug Gim. There's Rory again. Lee Westwood, Will Zalatoris, Brendan Steele now, 2 for 3 here at the Arnold Palmer. Good and good drives gained. Denny McCarthy, 1 for 2. Kevin Streelman, 3 for 4. Sung Jae, 3 for 3. Keegan. There's Keegan, 5 for 5 with an average of a top 32. Doing it in Keegan Bradley ways. The irons aren't as high as you would think, but the tee is good. The around the green is good. He just doesn't putt well here. Nothing changes for Keegan Bradley in that regard. Hideki, 5 for 5. Average of top 40. So there's a look at good drives gained. The last thing I kind of want to look at is the 200 plus proximity. It's not that one. It is this one. And how much do I need to scroll over for you all? A lot. All right. So there's Prox total. There's Prox 200. Tom Hoge leads in that regard. Then Rory, Brendan Steele, Matthew Wolff, Mark Leishman. First time we've said him tonight. Oh, God. Oh, that's the way my weekend has went. Just can't do anything right. So there's Mark Leishman. He's 4 for 5 in making the cut. Pretty good, solid finishes here. Average top 25. There's Bryson. There's Keegan, Maverick McNeely. Only 1 for 2. Martin Laird, 3 for 4. Ian Poulter, 5 for 5. Chris Kirk's 3 for 4. So these are your guys that are have hit historically the 200 plus irons well here. I'm going to sort this by finish again for you all and begin the sign off. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for the Data Dive show. We'll have a lot of good information to cover tomorrow for the Arnold Palmer. The one thing I want to remind you is that the Arnold Palmer is not the only tournament going this week. The Puerto Rican Open is also going, so I have a full schedule this week. Tonight, the initial research. Tomorrow night, Monday, being the Data Dive, and Wednesday, the DFS Tactics for the Arnold Palmer. Tuesday night is going to be the entirety of the Puerto Rican Open. So, whatever very little initial research, and then, the Data Dive and the DFS Tactics all in one night for the Puerto Rico Open. So make sure you, mark your reminders, and if you want to get in on any, especially outright wagers, for the Puerto Rico Open. I will be covering all that Tuesday night. So again, hopefully your all's DFS went a lot better this week than mine. Anytime I suggest in the near future to use Matthew Wolff, kick me in the nuts, because that's what I deserve for mentioning Matthew Wolff. A swift kick to the nuts. With that note, that tells you everything you need to know about my week. For all of the wagers you had this week at the Honda, for all of your DFS contests this week at the Honda, for any early wagers you're thinking about at the Arnold Palmer or the Puerto Rico Open. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.